So Raymond, you were saying to me about how the Million Man March started
Right.
with the men's only meeting at Howard University.
And it was canceled. And so I was livid because obviously somebody was looking out for their career, their ego, more than they were looking out for our people.
By that time, how old were you?
I was 20, 21.
And how long had you known the Minister Louis Farrakhan
I
by
have
that
been in
time?
the nation since February 22nd, 1989.
Outstanding.
And I was a lieutenant at the time over the Young Brothers.
Yes.
And I had 46 men.
Yes. So you were in the Fruit of Islam.
Correct. And we had 19 different drug sites across D.C. and in Baltimore and Pittsburgh. And so because I had the Young Brothers,
And these are drug sites you're trying to liquidate.
we didn't try. We got them drug dealers up out of there. And so we got in 19 different altercations, Gabe, with police officers and drug dealers with guns and whatnot. We never had an injury. And we put people in the hospital and all of that when we got into these altercations.
Because you were, the Fruit of Islam is trained in martial arts.
Trained martial art, but we're also trained to move as a unit. Like if one of us is fighting, we're all fighting.
Yeah.
We're not, we don't judge each other.
Yes. Yeah.
We back each other.
Yes.
And that would make a good movie.
Yes.
Because there's some excellent stories that would make black men's chests stick out.
Yes, yes. Because what we're basically trying to do is clean up the black community, get out the parasites, the drug dealers.
Criminals are really operating on fear. They don't operate on love. So if you confront them and you're willing, fear makes you fight, and you're willing to fight out of love, God is going to give you the victory 9 out of 10 times.
Yes, sir.
So the minister spoke in New York, he spoke in Philadelphia, then he spoke in D.C., where the idea originated out of their supreme wisdom that Master Raymond Muhammad gave us, and he announced the Million Man March. And if you go look at the tape, it's almost like he had a recollection and just said, "Oh, we're going to have a march," because the speech was over, and then he grabbed the mic back from Brother Jabril Muhammad out of Baltimore, and he said, "Next year we're going to have a million man march," and then he went on to talk about it, and then he went on a tour, uniting black men or uniting the brotherhood of the black man of North America in 1994, which culminated in the Million Man March in 1995.
When we were speaking earlier this afternoon, you made mention of the impact on the Million Man March of the O.J. Simpson trial and the performance of Johnny Cochran. Talk about that.
Yeah, God made the Million Man March happen. Okay, the minister thought he was going to get 150,000 people out there. When he said the Million Man March, he realized what he had said. It was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I just said 1 million. But God intervened.
God put those words in his
God
mouth.
wasn't going to make him a liar. And if you remember,
We had about 2.5 million people there.
crime went down. No murders. There was no arrests. The only person who got arrested at the Million Man March was a Jewish protester who was down there trying to stir up a problem, and the police got him up out of there quickly. But, Joy Reid said when the insurrection happened on January the 6th, she said if black people were to try to take the Capitol, we'd be slaughtered.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, no, ma'am. I said, because October 16, 1995, we took the Capitol.
Oh, and in fact,
nobody got slaughtered.
And nobody got slaughtered. I mean, if I remember, the minister spoke from the footsteps of the Capitol.
We had total control, and we were in charge of the security of the Capitol, and nobody got killed. Nobody got beat. No pepper spray.
Nobody got arrested.
Nobody got arrested.
No breaking up of property.
So,
no destruction of government property.
No, none of that.
So listen, let me tell you, I was there, and I was with the Air Force Sergeant. And I know the minister said not to bring any kind of weapons, but some people, they can take any chances. But the fact is, nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
Nothing negative happened. And it was the most beautiful march in the history of the United States.
Beautiful day.
In fact, I would say it was the biggest march and most peaceful march in
Definitely.
human history.
Definitely. And see, this is the last thing I want to point out on your video here is the president fled town. The Congress fled town.
That's right.
The Senate fled town and the Supreme Court. And we shut down the federal government that day. So when you drive the leaders of a country out of their capital, you've taken over the capital. You've taken over the country.
Indeed.
Legitimately.
That's right.
So really, ever since the Million Man March, this has been our country. The black man who suffered under slavery in North America, it's been our country. And that's why they want to make America great again, because they know they've lost the country. They've lost the country.
Yes. Well, listen. The good people, black, white, Jewish, and other, really, I think, have to understand that there's no room for prejudice.
That's right.
There's no room for that kind of murderous violence and that racial prejudice. And really, that's what the Million Man March to me proved. It showed all the things. So my partner, deceased, God bless his soul, it's a white gentleman. He was a decent gentleman. He said to me, when he heard, he said, Gabe, you're doing very well in your profession. I don't want you going down there with that Farrakhan and getting involved in all that havoc. So we were out somewhere up in Upper Marlboro with the senator at the time, Tommy Broadwater. He says, Tommy, Gabe wants to go on that march. I don't think I'm communicating with him. Can you speak to him for me? Tommy said, what? You mean the Million Man March? I'm taking 30 people myself.
Yeah.
And he went. He's since passed away. I went. And when I came back, my partner did not have enough good things to say. He still didn't like that Farrakhan, but he said, oh, what a lovely march. He was just effusive in his praise because a lot of people like him, he was white, feared that there was going to be a riot, that the Million Man March was going to result in violence and bloodshed. And that's why they fled.
And then Murphy didn't want to come because he thought it was going to be a riot. We did his security at the time. Yeah.
Yes. But the thing about it is, it put a lie to all the fears that they had, all the things that had been said, because that was one of the most, and the weather was picture perfect.
Perfect weather.
Everything was, all the stars were aligned.
If I can give you one more story, I did a delivery to a guy who did polling. He had a national polling company. He had a mansion in Alexandria. And he warned me that they were going to lock Farrakhan up for talking about the march. Talking about the war in Iraq. And he said they were going to lock him up if he keeps talking about the war. And I said, please lock him up. I said, because you ain't never seen protesters. You've seen the Fruit of Islam leading black folks to come get their minister back. Okay. Yeah. And he looked at me and he said, I never thought of that. He said, yeah, if we locked him up, that would be. But one thing he said, when he figured out I was Fruit of Islam, this is a white guy, he gave me a tour of his house. He was so honored to have Fruit of Islam in his house. And he told me he was at the Million Man March. He said when the minister said it was about atonement, he said, I'm going to be there, because he was a devout Christian.
Yes. Well, most of the people at the march were Christians.
Yeah,
and many of the people at the march, to be honest with you, who came were white. There were white men there too.
Yeah.
Because some of them who were at the federal government, because the city, as you said, was taken over, they came out of their offices and came and mingled with the crowd and were part of the crowd.
And they didn't have any problems.
And they had nobody.
Because the black man at his core is civilized.
That's right.
And when I say we didn't plan on them like taking the country, but what I'm saying is when you flee your capital, you've been put in effect. And, God says in the scriptures, I take the kingdom from whom I please and give it to whom I please. And if you look at it that way, effectively, we put the United States government into effect.
And you know what's interesting?
They left.
Well, they left because people had this unjustified fear.
Yeah.
But again, look at how God works. I tell people all the time, it was maybe about 10 years in the making, 12 years, but there would have been no Barack Obama.
Right.
Without the Million Man March, because the Million Man March was also a voter registration campaign.
Right. Yep.
And people were registered right there. Tell us about that.
If you look at all the presidency elections after the Million Man March, they were all contested. All of them. Bush, Gore. Then finally we got to Barack Obama. And even Trump is a backlash to the Million Man March, because he's a backlash to, every time black people start getting ahead, there's a certain group of people who think they're superior because of their color that, create a backlash. Every time black people have gotten ahead, like, they'll burn our neighborhoods down, or they'll go into Jim Crow or whatever. So Trump is actually in effect of you can trace it all the way back to the
Oh yes, it was a
Million
backlash, and,
It's
and
a
look at
backlash.
and look at what happened at the Capitol on January 16th. January 16th, those persons who say they back the blue, they back the police, they support the government, they support the military. What did they do? They tried to break down the Capitol, break in the doors, hang Mike Pence. They wanted to hang
Oh my
Mike
goodness.
Pence.
It was embarrassing.
It was very
It
embarrassing.
was bad. And let me say this about people the media tries to scare you about January the 6th. They were in there for 2 hours. Okay. That was a pitiful insurrection. The Metropolitan Police whooped their behinds and put them out of the Capitol. That wasn't even a military force. Okay. A police force put them out. And I've spoken to many of them and thanked them for saving the democracy because if they were able to stop the vote that night, then they would have put the government into effect.
Yes.
Essentially taking it back from when we put the government into effect with the Million Man March. And one of the things the Metropolitan Police said to me, he said, when we saw Prince George's County Police roll up, he said, we knew we were good. So I take pride in that there was a black mayor with a black police chief over a predominantly African-American police force, along with PG, which is where most predominant, black folks live and work, that we saved the democracy that day.
Indeed.
We saved our democracy.
That's right. That's
that
right.
day,
That's
you know?
right. That's right. Because what was really just as pitiful about the mob, really that's what it was,
Yeah.
is the flags that they had. When I
Yeah.
saw a guy come into the Congress with a Confederate flag,
Right. And
Auschwitz and,
jerseys, just terrible.
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 6 million wasn't enough. And here it is, they try to paint the Nation of Islam as anti-Semitic when, the Nation of Islam would never go around with a T-shirt saying 6 million wasn't
Absolutely
enough.
not. We would never disrespect the Jewish faith in that way. But it's, Jesus was Jewish. He was a rabbi.
Yeah.
And Jesus is so important because Jesus ruled from love and service. And if he's the Son of God, but yet he served and ruled from love. That is an example because when you're on top and you're dominating other people's lives that you didn't create, karma is coming your way eventually. If you treat the children of God incorrectly, you will be dethroned, and then you're subject to be treated incorrectly because of the law of karma.
Yes.
So Jesus is very important because it teaches people who are dominant and who are strong and leaders of a country or people to rule with love and service.
Yes.
And love and service, if you get dethroned or something happens to you, people still going to love you.
Oh, yes, indeed.
In your fallen state, quote unquote.
Yes,
fallen
indeed.
State.
Yes, indeed.
But if you rule with being brutal and supremacy and bombs and guns and tanks and tear gas, you're gonna fall.
And hard
Sooner
too.
or later, because God controls everything. God will take you down with a swarm of bees if He needs to.
As we conclude on this
sir.
point, Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter, talking about service and love.
Yeah. It's no coincidence he passed away precisely when he passed away. Because to me, God was warning this country, don't rule out of hate, fear, and division. He said, this man ruled out of love, an example of Jesus, and unity. And it's funny how many black Americans he had around him during his last years on the planet.
Stop right there.
His pastor.
Stop right there. I did not know
Yeah.
that Archery, where he was the only
Yeah.
white family. I did not know there's a woman called Idleen Clark or something is her name. It's on the National Park Service website. That she was supposedly, because his mother was a nurse. And what was different about his mother, she used to deliver both the white babies and the black babies. So she was a different kind of white woman in the segregated Jim Crow South. So Jimmy Carter grew up among black people. What do you think that did with his mentality?
Well, I think that, black people, we were dominated by the Caucasian people and a lot of supremacists and whatnot. There were some good white people back in slavery times as well. But the overall stigma or reputation is that, white people were superior and they treated us very poorly. And, for a man to grow up in Georgia and, this is what I was going to say. All of that bad treatment didn't make us into bitter people. That's why God loves us. That's why God looks out for us. Because Hitler treated the Jewish people in Germany terrible for 6 years. And if you look at the way some of the Jewish supremacists act in Israel right now, they're acting just like the Nazis. They're acting just like the people who dominated them. And that's the trial. How do you act when somebody has power over you? Do you give in to that negative power, or do you have faith and keep the love in your heart that God, that represents God, and not be corrupted by the negative, by the evil, by all, the forces of division and death,
Brother Muhammad, you're coming here today, you don't even understand how powerful it is. Because the message you are sending is, in a world at war, check this out. Russia is now at war with the West, believe it or not.
Yes, sir.
It just hasn't gone nuclear yet.
Yes,
I hope
sir.
it doesn't, because we'd all be gone.
They don't have no power.
But the point you made was, the point you're making is, God loves those who love others. That
That's
when
right.
you are in power, when you have the power, wield that power with wisdom and kindness.
That's right.
Because you're not going to be there forever. And so when you lose that power, or like Jimmy Carter, you step away, people are still going to be with you. In fact,
They're going to love you.
They're going to love you.
Yeah.
I would argue Jimmy Carter did more out of office
Absolutely.
than he did when he was in office.
Because he didn't have as many people he had to answer to. See, he only had to answer to God and his Christ when he was out of office. When he was in office, he had to answer to all the lobby groups and government groups and all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
But yeah, that's really, and you know what, Brother Gabe, I learned that from reading the book, The Forgotten Slaves. And it teaches that we as black people, North Africans and Middle Easterns, enslaved Europeans. And so what I realized by reading the book is that they learned slavery from us.
Okay.
They learned mistreatment from us, because if you dominating people and enslaving them, you're going to mistreat them.
Yes.
And so when I read about the forgotten slaves, I said to myself, "Oh wow, you have to rule people like Jesus." That's why Jesus is so important, because Jesus showed you how to rule when you're in power.
Yes, sir.
Even the Muslims raised the sword and slaughtered people. They were very fair, but in some cases they did misuse their powers.
Yes.
And so that's why when the Europeans came to power, they started mistreating the Muslims and mistreating the Africans, because we did it to them.
Yes.
But the white supremacists keep that part of history, quiet. They don't like to talk about how we dominated them.
Yes. The Moors
ruled them.
The Moors,
Hannibal.
yeah.
Hannibal killed 50,000 Roman soldiers in the afternoon.
Yes.
And he was a North African black man.
Yes. This is the person right here. Her name was Rachel Idlet Clark. So it says that Rachel Idlet Holt Clark was born on April 2nd, 1890, in Sumner County, Georgia. In 1912, Rachel married Jack Clark, and in the 1920s, they moved to Archery to work for Earl Carter. Earl Carter was the father of Jimmy Carter.
Wow.
The small tenement house the Clarks lived in was just past the Carter's vegetable garden. They lived on a path. Young Jimmy Carter traveled often. He spent a lot of time with the Clarks and often asked to spend the night with them when his parents were out of town. The Clarks kept a slipping pallet filled either with corn shocks or wheat straw, upon which Jimmy would often sleep. Young Jimmy spent time working on the farm besides Jack and Rachel.
The days began at 4 a.m., hoeing weeds, stacking peanuts, picking cotton, and caring for the Carter's farm animals. Although farm life was hard work, Jimmy and Rachel would find time to go fishing in the nearby creek. On the walk to the creek, Rachel would tell Jimmy stories about life's lessons and would share with him her words of wisdom. These words stayed with him all his life. In President Carter's book, An Hour Before Daylight, he stated, quote, "Of all the people who lived near to us on the farm, Rachel Clark was the most remarkable and made the most significant and lasting impact on me. Rachel Clark leaves a legacy of goodness in the little community of Archery and Plains, as people remember her words of encouragement, telling them always to do the thing that was right."
That was right.
Isn't that something?
There you go.
Isn't that something?
And I'm sure she got that from her religion, her Christian religion.
Indeed.
You know, that's down in the Bible Belt.
Yes, do unto others,
You know,
right?
Do unto others as you would want people to do unto you. And don't do unto others as you would not want.
What would you say to young boys and girls in the final parting this afternoon? Parting words of wisdom.
Read as much of the scripture as possible. Listen to as many lectures of Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali. You know, Muhammad Ali was also a minister in the nation, and Minister Farrakhan, and internalize. You know, study the scriptures, study Jesus, study Muhammad, and realize that you've been deceived into acting other than yourself. You know,
Talk about the use of profanity and dope and alcohol and how it's destroying the community.
Well, there are people who are promoting. There are people who are in charge of creating trends, and these are not Jesus's people. These are not Muhammad's people. And so what they do is they find someone amongst us that promotes gang banging, that promotes drug, dealing or doing drugs, or stripping. I believe one of our famous stars right now was an ex-porn star. So they elevated her because they want our young people to follow after that lifestyle, gang banging, and so it's a trick and it's a trap, and they're trying to feed their private prisons that they own stock in and ruin our lives while we're thinking we're being real NIGGERs, right? No, you want to be a real black man, and a black man is a civilized man. He's thoughtful, he works hard, he prays, he looks after his family, he protects his family, he protects his community, and he walks with no fear. A black man is second self to God. So can you imagine God having fear? So how in the world could his son have fear? And that's the way I would recommend young people. They study and they walk with their chest out without fear.
Thank you very much, Captain Raymond Muhammad, my brother of 25 plus years. Love you, man.
Love you too.
Take care.